to make something that's an unashamedly commercial prospect. It's a collaborative piece of work in which everyone comes out of it looking pretty good. Adele sounds great, the productions sound great, but I wonder whether it's as interesting an artifact of Adele's artistry as the first record. And I'd like to think that when we look back in 10, 20 years' time, and we look at 21, which sold over 20 million records, and got her 6 Grammys, that we'll look at it as the commercial album. That was the one that did well, and then, of course, she went on to make much more interesting things.
I heard that you settled down.
She really stood out at the Brits because it was just her and a piano. The stage was dark. All you could see was her wearing a black dress, hair pulled back, and a piano accompaniment. It was so different to anything else on the Brits, because the Brits is all about artists being shot out of cannons and things, and there she was singing. The delivery was so emotional that it became a massive hit. And all of a sudden, the very next day, people were talking about Adele as being in a completely different league from the way she'd been 2 days before. If she herself was going to look back and point out any one day, it would have been that Brits performance. And all of a sudden, every door in the world opened to her.
You could just sense that it was working. You know, there's nothing like being on a television show and you're sitting there and somebody else is doing something and you get this frisson go through the studio. It's working. And off camera you look at somebody else and they're going, and everybody knows it's happening. You look at that clip and that audience shuts up. Now the Brits audience is one of the rudest and loudest and drunkest crowds in show business. And if they all shut up, it's because they've all felt the same thing at the same time. She's stealing the Brits.
Her lyrics are not flowery and not full of crazy metaphors or like super extreme Celine Dion style like emotion. It's just like, it's very real, it's very plain spoken. I mean, her words in that song, you know, the premise of that song is that she shows up on the doorstep of an ex-boyfriend. It's like, hey, I was in town and I know you didn't invite me here, but I just need to get this off my chest. And her lyrics almost read like a script of if that scene was taking place in real life, and that's part of its appeal.
Someone Like You was about him getting engaged really quickly after we broke up. And I wrote that to feel better about myself, really. And it was about trying to convince myself that I will meet someone else and I will be happy.
The Brits' performance provoked a huge surge in sales of 21, and press interest in Adele reached fever pitch. Given the scale of her popularity, attention began to fall on the singer's image, with many noting that in the current era of pop music, Adele represented a triumph for substance over style.
I've always found it really sad that there is a pressure even among female singers who are really talented to keep one-upping how sexy they have to be, how provocative they have to be. Lady Gaga came around and there was this idea that everyone had to be outrageous, and an example that really was sad was Christina Aguilera, who we can all agree is one of the best female singers of the last 10 or 20 years. But when she did her last album for Bionic, she did this horrendous video where she was kissing women and in bondage gear and wearing lingerie and wearing like weird Clockwork Orange spikes on her eyes, and it was so obvious she was trying, like, she was like, oh, this is what people like now, or her label was saying that. And I do feel there's a lot of record labels who feel like, okay, we need our next Gaga or our next Rihanna or whatever, our next Nicki Minaj. And then here's Adele. She does not look like the typical pop star. That's a fact. Some people might have thought that would work in her disfavor. Oh no, she doesn't look a certain way. I feel it actually has completely worked in her favor in every way. And the fact that she completely isn't like, okay, now that I'm famous, I better like lose 40 pounds. And she seems completely okay with herself, and her fans seem completely okay with it. I actually feel if Adele lost weight, like, people would be upset. They'd be like, you sold out. I think the fact that Adele is who she is happy with who she is, has completely worked in her favor. So anyone who ever said her image was going to be a problem, I think her image was absolutely part of her appeal. Absolutely.
I've never seen magazine covers and seen music videos and been like, I need to look like that if I want to be a success. Never. I don't want to be some skinny mini with my out. I really don't want to do it. And I don't want people confusing what it is that I'm about. If I wanted to do all that, I don't think I'd get away with it. I don't think people would believe me.
Top 40 is basically a thing of the past and has been replaced by what I call turbo pop, but we would all understand as the kind of Pitbull, Kesha, Flo Rida type music. Here's where the miracle of someone like you comes along. It's the first piano and vocal record to go to #1 in the rock era. This is at a time when almost every other song on those playlists has a beat per minute count, which is higher than can be performed by humans using acoustic instruments.
The way she presents herself is as a normal, down-to-earth woman. She's not high gloss. She is full of figure. What you see is what you get, and I think that's the strength of her appeal. It's very forthright. And the whole way she's marketed, you look at the CD sleeve, the booklet for 21, it's all black and white shots of her working in the studio. She's a working musician, she's a working artist.
My hands, they're stone, but my knees were far too weak.
By the summer of 2011, Adele had a third consecutive #1 single in Set Fire to the Rain, and the prizes were beginning to roll in. The most spectacular accolade, however, came at the 2012 Grammys, where Adele won a record 6 awards for 21.
No British act had ever won 6 Grammys in a year. I think she didn't get enough attention in that respect back home.
Close my eyes.
And the important thing is that 3 of them were 3 of the big 4. Adele won 3 of the big 4, meaning Record of the Year, single, Song of the Year, composition, and Album of the Year. She couldn't win the 4th, because that's Best New Artist, but she had won that the year of 19, so she has won all 4 of the big 4 at the Grammys.
After her triumph at the Grammys and the record-breaking phenomenon of 21, fans waited with bated breath for what would come next from Adele, the breadth of her talent having cast her as a young artist with the world at her feet.
Obviously, the scramble will now be on to produce an album just as successful, which is probably not going to happen, because how can it? And of course, if it doesn't, then people are going to say, oh my God, it's all over for Adele. But she's still got that voice, and whatever happens, I think that her voice, she and her voice, will be in the music business for the next 40 years to come.
In a sense, she's at a crossroads. She could become more of an entertainer than an artist, someone like Shirley Bassey or Petula Clark, and go that road, where the emotions become huge, large, grand narratives, which is more about theatre. Or she could pare it down again and take it back to Adele from Tottenham, and then you might get something really interesting there.
From the personal acoustic songs on 19 to the huge emotionally charged ballads of 21, Adele has forged a career that has touched audiences across the planet and united them behind her music, while always remaining uniquely herself.
Her appeal has never hinged on youth. Despite the fact that she's albums called 19 and 21, she definitely is not about being a teenager or about being a hot young thing. You could see Adele still headlining shows the way Tony Bennett headlined shows when she's in her 60s or 70s, and singing to people who grew up with her. So many of the other artists, and this goes for male artists as well, their appeal depends on what they look like, more than what they sound like, and also depends on trends. And as a result, their shelf life is built in. And I think with Adele, there's no expiration date at all.
There aren't that many real people, men or women, in any aspect of popular music. Virtually everyone looks like an athlete or a model. And here comes Adele who does not look like an athlete or model, who canceled a major tour of America on her first record to be with her boyfriend. Sounds like a real person to me. Sounds interesting. Sounds different. If she's got a decent song, I might pay some attention. Oh, she does have a decent song? I'm in.
No fine, no kiss to see you any
The artists who are really special in a long term in a social sense are the inspirations, the enablers. Adele has been a success, and she's widely known, and she's widely loved. That's the thing that is so important about Adele's success. She's made it without playing any of the games that people play.